The scent of rosemary chicken filled the kitchen, warm and buttery, curling around my face as I lit the final candle on the dining table. The tablecloth was ironed, the wine was breathing in its decanter, and Finn's favorite mashed potatoes sat steaming in a ceramic bowl at the center. It was the kind of Thursday evening that tried hard to feel like normal. Safe. Whole. I reached for my phone just as it vibrated. The screen lit up with a name I once adored, Grant. One message. I should have known. My fingers hovered for a second too long before I opened it. I'm sorry. Kaylee's pregnant. I'm leaving. Please don't make this harder than it already is. For a moment, my brain refused to process the words. It was as if someone had replaced English with a foreign language. I read it again. And again. The words didn't change. Just 6 seconds ago, I was folding napkins into triangles and humming along to soft jazz. Now my world had shifted into something unrecognizable. He was leaving me. Not just leaving, but for Kaylee, my sister. And she was pregnant. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't crumble to the floor like the dramatizations I'd seen in movies. Instead, I gently placed the phone down beside the folded napkins, smoothed my blouse, and walked into the hallway like nothing had happened. Finn. I called out. My voice miraculously didn't crack. Dinner's ready. He came bounding down the stairs in his usual chaos, socks sliding on the hardwood as he grinned at me with that gap-toothed smile. 10 years old and completely unaware that his family had just been detonated. What's for dinner? He asked, peeking into the kitchen. Chicken and potatoes. Your favorite, I said, brushing a hand over his curls. He sat down without complaint, chattering about his science project and how his friend Max brought a tarantula to school. I smiled, nodded, even chuckled at the right moments, all while my mind ran at the speed of a train with no brakes. Grant and Kaylee. Kaylee, my baby sister. The one I helped through breakups, college applications, and panic attacks. The one who cried in my arms when our mother died. The one I trusted enough to bring into our lives, our home, our family routines. How long? How many dinners had she sat across from me, sipping wine and smiling, while secretly sleeping with my husband? How many holidays had we posed for pictures, his hand on my waist, hers clutching a mug while hiding something that monstrous? I chewed slowly as Finn spoke, the food now tasteless in my mouth. No wonder Grant had been working late more often. No wonder he had started taking more phone calls outside. I remembered now how Kaylee had shown up in tears 6 months ago, claiming a bad breakup. I'd offered her a spare room and a warm bed. She'd accepted with gratitude. And behind that gratitude, betrayal was already taking root. I reached for the wine glass. My fingers didn't even tremble. So, Mom, Finn said between bites, can I have a sleepover with Max this weekend? Of course, sweetheart, I replied, managing a smile. We'll talk about the details tomorrow, okay? He nodded and focused on scraping his plate clean. I excused myself a few minutes later under the pretense of checking the laundry. I walked calmly to the utility room, closed the door softly, and leaned against the washing machine. Only then did I let myself breathe. It wasn't sobbing. It wasn't breaking down. It was the kind of deep, shaking breath that comes when you realize nothing will ever be the same again. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't have the luxury. Because this wasn't just about heartbreak. It wasn't about Kaylee or even Grant. It was about Finn. It was about making sure his world stayed intact even as mine fell to ash. I pulled out my phone and reread the message once more. My chest burned. Pregnant. He had the audacity to write it in a text. Like telling me we were out of milk. No apology big enough. No explanation human enough. And yet, he thought this would be easier by not saying it to my face. That was the final insult. I tapped the screen, hit save, and locked the message under a hidden folder. I'd need that later, maybe in court. Maybe just to remind myself this wasn't a nightmare. Back in the kitchen, Finn had already moved on to dessert, helping himself to 2 cookies. I'm going to take a shower after this, he said. Then maybe finish my book? Sounds like a good plan, I said softly. He paused, looking at me with narrowed eyes. You okay, Mom? There it was. The flicker of intuition he'd inherited from me. I smiled again. This one hurt more. I'm okay, I said. Just tired. He accepted it and went back to his plate. And me? I just stared into the flickering candle flame on the table, thinking not about the betrayal, but about the storm I would become in the days to come. It had been subtle, almost laughably so, the receipt tucked into the inner pocket of Grant's sports coat, one I'd only discovered while searching for his dry cleaning tag. It was folded small, nearly square, and bore the logo of a boutique hotel 2 towns over. Dinner for 2. A bottle of red. Room service. A single suite. I'd stared at it for a full minute, willing it to make sense, willing it to become something else. But the details were undeniable. 2 dinners. 1 room. His signature on the final line, looping and careless. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I didn't confront him. That might surprise most people, especially those who know how fiercely I used to protect our marriage. But rage, I've found, can either burn hot and out of control or cold and clean. Mine turned to ice. Quiet. Methodical. I waited. That same week, I opened a private account at a different bank. Small transfers first, money from my personal freelancing gigs, birthday gifts from my parents, even some leftover savings from before I married Grant. I told myself it was just in case. Just a safety net. But I already knew I was building an escape hatch. Over the following months, I noticed things that only made that receipt feel more damning. Grant had become more careful with his phone, never letting it rest face up. His schedule shifted slightly, more last-minute meetings, more unexplained weekend trips. He still kissed me on the cheek before bed, still brought home groceries once in a while, but the warmth behind those gestures had dimmed. Looking back, I don't think he was even aware how transparent he'd become. Each time he left the house, I worked. I backed up every financial record, downloaded statements, scanned receipts. I logged mileage, noted when he said he was somewhere and when GPS told a different story. It wasn't for revenge. It was for protection. For preparation. I knew the storm would come, I just didn't expect the lightning bolt to be a text message sent while I was setting the dinner table. But now that it had come, now that the ugly truth was out in the open, there was no more pretending. Every suspicious purchase, every spa gift card he claimed was for a coworker's baby shower, every unaccounted withdrawal, now fit into place like puzzle pieces forming an ugly picture. Kaylee. Always Kaylee. And yet, I still didn't cry. Instead, I dialed the number of a woman I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Eleanor Denton, divorce attorney. Smart. Tactical. Ruthless when needed. We'd once worked on a fundraiser committee together, long before Grant started pulling away. She had a sharp sense of humor and an even sharper sense for numbers. If anyone could untangle a marriage built on illusion, it was her. She picked up on the second ring. Isla? Her voice sounded surprised. It's been a while. It has, I said. I need your help. She paused. I'm listening. I told her everything. The receipt. The patterns. The text. Kaylee. I haven't filed anything yet, I added, but I'm preparing. Quietly. I need to make sure Finn and I are protected before anything becomes official. I can help you with that, she said with the calm certainty of someone who's dismantled marriages before breakfast. First things first, we secure your assets. Separate your finances, establish a paper trail, and document everything. Do not let him know you're onto him until we've built your foundation. I exhaled, grateful for her steadiness. I've already started. The account is open. I've left just enough in the joint accounts to keep him from noticing. Good, she said. Keep that balance just high enough to look believable. Make no sudden changes. We'll handle this like chess, not checkers. We talked logistics for another 15 minutes. Power of attorney. Custody preparation. property ownership. Eleanor promised to send me the starter paperwork by the end of the night. When I hung up, I felt stronger. Not because the situation hurt any less, but because I was no longer a passive participant in my own story. I'd spent so many years smoothing the rough edges, hiding the cracks, telling myself that marriage was hard and that love just changed over time. I believed that if I worked harder, loved harder, it would all come back together. But now I saw it clearly. I had been building a home with someone who had already decided to torch it from within. And if he thought I'd quietly hand him the keys to the wreckage, he didn't know me at all. Later that night, I tucked Finn into bed. He asked why I seemed tired. Just a long day, I told him, brushing the hair off his forehead. But everything's going to be okay. That part was true. I sat in my room afterward, the moonlight filtering through the curtains, and stared at the receipt again. I no longer felt nauseous looking at it. I felt focused. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about survival and making sure my son grew up watching his mother reclaim her strength piece by piece. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to storm. I would take everything back, not with fire, but with silence and strategy. Grant and Kaylee had written the first half of the story behind my back. Now I would write the ending. The morning light spilled across the kitchen tiles as if nothing had changed. The same soft gold hues, the same hum of the refrigerator, the same smell of coffee drifting through the air. But everything had changed. I moved with purpose, steady and composed, as though I had done this 1,000 times before. By 7 a.m., I had already showered, dressed, and checked the balance on our joint account. Then, with fingers that didn't flinch, I froze it. I transferred what remained into a protected account bearing only my name. The banker I'd spoken to the previous day had been professional and discreet. She didn't flinch when I used words like legal separation and evidence of infidelity. She simply nodded and walked me through the process with precise efficiency. Grant wouldn't notice right away. He rarely checked our finances. He'd left that up to me years ago, trusting that bills would be paid, groceries bought, and vacations planned. I was the manager of our life, the quiet backbone of our shared comfort. He never suspected that one day I would use that knowledge to cut him out of it entirely. Finn sat at the breakfast bar, swinging his feet as he spooned cereal into his mouth. He was still in his pajamas, his hair sticking up in the back. Just a boy, innocent and unaware. I leaned over and kissed the top of his head. After school, Aunt Marcia's picking you up, I told him. He looked up, mouth full. Why? I have a few things to take care of this afternoon, I said simply. Nothing to worry about. He nodded and went back to crunching cereal. I was grateful he didn't ask more questions. By mid-morning, the locksmith arrived. I had chosen someone highly rated but discreet, a one-man business run out of a nearby suburb. He showed up in a gray van, nodded politely when I opened the door, and got to work without unnecessary chatter. As he unscrewed the old lock, the weight of what I was doing settled more firmly on my shoulders. This wasn't just about security. It was symbolic. A severing. I was changing the locks not only on our home, but on our life. Grant would come back, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, and discover he no longer belonged here. I watched the locksmith work, my arms folded tightly across my chest. A breeze passed through the open door, lifting the hem of my dress. My skin prickled, but I didn't move. When he was done, he handed me 2 sets of keys and offered a brief smile. You're all set, ma'am. Thank you, I said, and closed the door behind him. I stood in the foyer, staring at the gleaming new lock. For a moment, I imagined Grant's face when his key no longer worked. Would he rage? Would he panic? Would he even be surprised? My chest ached, not from sadness, but from the weight of preparing for the storm that would follow. But I didn't second-guess it. The time for doubt was long gone. Next came the call to Eleanor. File the papers, I said simply when she picked up. Adultery as the grounds. Make it formal. She didn't need to ask for clarification. She'd already drafted everything. We went over the final details, the timeline, the custody considerations, the division of assets, most of which were already in my control. The house was mine, a gift from my parents before the wedding. Grant had never been added to the deed. At the time, it hadn't mattered. We were a team, a unit. Why complicate things with paperwork? Now I was grateful I never had. Eleanor assured me we'd be in court within the week. The evidence was clear, the grounds legitimate. Keep your head down until then, she advised. Let him come to you. The law's on your side. I thanked her and hung up. The house felt heavier now. Emptier. Not in the physical sense. His clothes were still in the closet, his shoes still by the front door. But the illusion had evaporated. Where once there had been warmth and routine, there was now just absence. In the afternoon, I sat with Finn on the living room floor while he worked on a school project. I helped him cut construction paper into the shape of planets, listening as he recited facts about Jupiter and Saturn. I smiled and asked questions, keeping my voice bright. He didn't notice that Grant hadn't come home. When bedtime came, I tucked him in as usual. We read a chapter from his favorite book, and he kissed my cheek, murmuring a sleepy, "Love you, Mom," before drifting off. I sat on the edge of his bed for a long time, watching his chest rise and fall. I knew there would come a time when he would have questions about why Dad didn't come back, about what happened to the life we used to know. And when that time came, I would tell him the truth in a way he could understand. I would protect him from the ugliest parts, but I would never lie. That night, I slept in the guest room. I couldn't bring myself to lie in the bed where Grant had once reached for me with hands that now felt like they belonged to a stranger. I lay on the firmer mattress, staring at the ceiling, key resting on the nightstand beside me. The new lock. The new life. He was out there somewhere, still thinking he had time. Still thinking I would wait. But he was wrong. I had already closed the door and changed the lock behind him. It was nearly sunset when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, its vibration loud against the granite surface. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Only one person would be reaching out now, Kaylee. My younger sister. The same girl I once braided hair for, helped with math homework, shielded from heartbreak. The same girl now carrying my husband's child. I let it buzz twice more before I answered. Isla? Her voice was trembling, high-pitched with panic, like she'd been crying for hours, but hadn't let herself break completely. Can we talk? Please. I kept my tone even. I'm listening. There was a pause, the kind that tells you the caller is struggling to find the words. I didn't know it would go this far, she said. It wasn't supposed to be like this. He told me things. He said you didn't love him anymore, that the marriage was just convenience. My stomach clenched, but I didn't interrupt. I let her talk. Let her fill the silence with her rehearsed lines. I never meant to hurt you, she continued. I swear, Isla. When I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. He said he'd take care of us, that we could live at the house until we figured things out. But her voice broke. I didn't think you'd actually shut him out. I didn't think you'd change the locks. There it was. The real reason for the call. I stared out the window, watching the last of the light fade beyond the treetops, everything bathed in a soft amber hue. This used to be my favorite time of day. It was when the house felt the most like home, quiet, warm, full of the smell of dinner and the sound of Finn doing homework at the table. Now it was just a moment of stillness before I had to remind myself how much had changed. Kaylee, I said carefully, you're not calling to apologize. You're calling because you're realizing the man you thought would protect you has no ground to stand on. I am sorry, she whispered. Sorry you're pregnant by my husband? I asked, my voice still calm, measured. Or sorry that he didn't follow through on his promise to sweep you off your feet? She didn't answer. I sat down slowly on the kitchen stool, running my fingers along the edge of the countertop. Let me explain something to you. This house? It's in my name. Always has been. Grant never signed onto the deed. It was a wedding gift from our parents, remember? You were there. You wore that blue dress you hated. But he said she stopped herself. He said we'd be okay. I didn't laugh, though part of me wanted to. He's good at that. Making promises. Telling stories. Playing the victim. It worked on you, clearly. But what he didn't tell you is that I've been preparing for this for months. Every cent he thought was his was traceable. Every expense he hid, I found. Every lie he told, I documented. So, if you think he's coming back here, if you think he's bringing you with him, you're both sorely mistaken. The line went quiet for a moment. I could hear her breath catch, shaky and uneven. I'm scared, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You should be. I stood then, walking slowly toward the hallway where Finn's drawings still lined the walls. Crayon rockets and misshapen dinosaurs stared back at me. I gave you a place in my life. I gave you trust, Kaylee. And you burned it to the ground. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed Finn. You shattered the one place he should have felt safest. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I snapped, the first edge of fire in my voice since the call began. You may not have set out to destroy everything, but you did. And now you're looking to me to clean it up. To play the big sister again and make it okay. I just need some time, she begged. A place to figure things out. I don't have anywhere else. I'm not your savior anymore, I said coldly. You made your choices. Now live with them. The silence that followed felt heavy, swollen with everything unsaid between us. Childhood memories, late-night secrets, sisterly bonds, all of it buried under the weight of betrayal. She finally spoke. I never thought you'd be this cold. I never thought you'd be this cruel. Then I hung up. I stood there for a long time, staring at the screen, my thumb hovering over the contact before I finally blocked her number. Finn came out of his room not long after, rubbing his eyes, his voice still sleepy. Everything okay, Mom? I smiled, soft and warm, as if nothing in the world was wrong. Yeah, baby. Just a call from someone who made a big mistake. He nodded, trusting me completely. And that trust, that blind faith in my ability to hold his world together, gave me more strength than Kaylee or Grant would ever understand. I tucked him back into bed, kissed his forehead, and sat beside him until his breathing evened out. Then I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and stared out the window again. This was my house, my life, my terms. And no matter how many phone calls came from crying voices, none of them would sway me now. He didn't know it yet, but the world Grant had carefully curated, complete with secret rendezvous, whispered lies, and financial fantasies, had already begun to collapse. It started subtly, as most downfalls do. The first cracks don't make a sound, but once the structure begins to fall, it's relentless. I received the first sign of his unraveling when a notification popped up from the bank. An attempted transaction at a high-end electronics store had failed. Denied due to frozen joint funds. I imagined his reaction. The confusion. The disbelief. The start of a spiral he thought he was too smart to fall into. That same morning, I opened a file Eleanor had shared with me, an organized list of Grant's spending over the last 18 months. Hotel stays. Jewelry he never gifted to me. Meals for two charged in cities he wasn't supposed to be in. Airline tickets that never matched the travel he claimed for work. Some receipts had Kaylee's name right on them, sloppy and unbothered, like they never expected I'd find them. But I had. And now I would make sure the system did too. Every dollar he spent without regard now held weight in the case we were building. Every selfish decision he made without thinking about Finn or me was now ammunition. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about making sure the court saw exactly what I had endured. No ambiguity. No gray areas. Just facts. I found it ironic. Grant had always prided himself on being the calm one, the steady force. In arguments, he played the rational card while painting me as too emotional, too reactive. But the truth? He was never calm, he was cold. Calculating. Detached. His version of control was silence wrapped in a smile, and his greatest illusion was making others believe he had it all together. But now, without access to money and with no legal standing in the house he once strolled through like a king, he was starting to come undone. I knew because he started calling. The first few calls came late at night. I didn't answer. He left voicemails, long, rambling ones. The first was angry. Isla, what the hell is this? I can't access anything. Did you freeze our accounts? You can't do that without talking to me first. We have a child. We're still married. Call me back. I didn't. The next voicemail was softer. More pleading. Look, I know you're hurt. I get it. But you're being irrational. You're putting Finn in the middle of something he doesn't need to be in. Can we just meet and talk like adults? No lawyers. Just us. I deleted that one too. By the third, the tone shifted again, now laced with the arrogance I'd grown to loathe. You think you're so clever, don't you? Changing the locks? Freezing accounts? You think this is going to end well for you? We built that life together, Isla. You don't just get to erase me from it. But I wasn't erasing him. He had already done that himself, one lie at a time. One betrayal after another until the image of us as a family had become a ghost I no longer recognized. Eleanor assured me everything was unfolding exactly as it should. He's already revealing his instability, she told me over the phone. That helps your case. Don't engage directly. Let your silence do the talking. So I did. I poured all my energy into protecting Finn, into organizing the routines, the house, and the emotional buffer he needed. I updated the school records, ensuring they had only my contact information. I spoke to his counselor discreetly, not giving details, but enough to let them know change was happening at home. I would rather prepare now than react later. And as I fortified our lives, Grants fell further apart. Kaylee messaged me once. A short, desperate text. He's different now. I don't know what to do. I didn't respond. She had made her bed, and now she was realizing it wasn't lined with silk. She had believed Grant's charm, just like I had once. But charm, I'd learned, is not the same as character. Charm is what he used to distract, to seduce, to hide the rot underneath. And now, when real responsibility loomed, when it was no longer a game, he was failing. Reports from mutual friends started trickling in. Grant had shown up at a colleague's event and was asked to leave. He'd tried to cash in a business favor that no longer existed. He'd bragged too often, owed too much. The cracks were no longer hidden. They were visible. And everyone was starting to see them. At night, I sat with a glass of wine and watched the fire crackle in the living room, the quiet hum of stability wrapping around me like a blanket. Finn was asleep upstairs. The house was warm, safe, whole in a way it hadn't been in years. I didn't celebrate his unraveling. I didn't gloat. But I felt peace in the confirmation that I had done the right thing, not just for me, but for the son who would one day understand that his mother didn't crumble, she rose. And Grant? He was beginning to learn what it felt like to lose everything, piece by piece. The first official contact came through Eleanor's office, a curt email from Grant's attorney requesting amicable mediation to avoid escalating litigation. It was laughable, really. The man who had sent a text message to end a marriage was now trying to project civility. I stared at the email for a long moment before forwarding it to Eleanor with a single-line reply, "Proceed with full legal force." She didn't question it. She understood exactly where I stood. Still, things were starting to move faster. The courts were already reviewing our filings. The evidence of infidelity, screenshots, receipts, financial inconsistencies, was airtight. Eleanor said judges didn't often need to see this much, but it wouldn't hurt. Especially not when children were involved. Especially not when the husband had all but publicly declared his abandonment. What surprised me most during that week wasn't Grant's audacity, it was Kaylee's persistence. She called twice. I didn't pick up. She sent a voice note once, voice trembling and low. I know I've messed up, Isla. But you don't know what he's like when things don't go his way. He's not who I thought. He's cold. He barely talks to me anymore. I'm scared, and I don't know where to go. I didn't delete it. I didn't respond, either. Because sympathy was not the same thing as forgiveness. What she wanted now wasn't reconciliation. It was rescue. She thought I would save her, again. But I had nothing left to give her. I had already extended grace when she was broken and lost years ago. I had carried her through every storm. But this? This was the result of choices, not circumstance. And choices came with consequences. Eleanor kept me updated regularly. They're floundering, she said during our latest call. His attorney's trying to frame you as emotionally reactive and financially vindictive. Ironic, I muttered, swirling the tea in my mug. She laughed quietly. It is. But the documentation you've kept makes that angle almost impossible. Judges love details, Isla. And you've got them in spades. Every timeline, every expense, every lie, it's all verifiable. What about custody? I asked, my tone shifting. That was the only part that made me nervous. Finn. Always Finn. You've demonstrated consistent care and stability. He hasn't even contacted the school. He's had no overnights, no visits, no provisions. If he tries to challenge for joint custody, we'll demand a psychological evaluation and use his financial negligence to counter. You're in a strong position. I nodded, though I knew she couldn't see me. Still, strong position or not, it didn't make the days easier. It didn't stop the ache I felt when Finn would ask casually, has Dad called, or are we going to see him soon, and I'd have to gently redirect without outright lying. He's busy right now, I'd say. Or, he's figuring some things out. But I knew those answers had an expiration date. Soon, I'd have to tell the truth. Pieces of it, at least. I owed Finn that much. The pressure mounted as the legal process gained momentum. Papers had been served. Court dates were pending. And Grant's mask was slipping further each time his lawyer made a move. One afternoon, I caught sight of him outside the school, leaning against his car, sunglasses on, jaw tight. He didn't see me, but I saw him. Saw the irritation in the way he fidgeted, the desperation in his too casual stance. I knew he hadn't come for Finn. He was trying to be seen. Trying to make a point. That night, Eleanor received another email from his camp. This time, a veiled threat wrapped in legal jargon, suggesting that denying access to shared property and family assets could be viewed unfavorably in court. She responded in 2 lines. Per deed and financial records, said property and assets are not shared. My client has no obligation to respond further. He was flailing. And flailing people grasp at anything they can. Even illusions. Kaylee sent another message 2 days later. Longer this time, full of half-formed apologies and rewrites of history. You have every right to hate me, she wrote. But I didn't steal him from you. He made the choice. He chased me. He said your marriage was just a performance. I stared at the message. Not because I believed her, but because I wondered if she even knew the depth of her own manipulation. She wanted me to believe she was a pawn. That she had been seduced and tricked. Maybe she had. But she still played the game. I didn't reply. Instead, I poured myself into routine. Into the predictable cadence of breakfast and school drop-offs, of laundry and client calls, of evening stories and blanket forts with Finn. I baked more. I painted one of the guest bedrooms. I changed the curtains in the living room. Each small act was a reclaiming. A stitch in the seam of a life that had been torn apart. And at night, after Finn was tucked into bed, I would sit quietly with a book or the silence, letting the stillness remind me I was doing this. I was surviving it. Not by screaming. Not by fighting in public. But by holding my line, protecting my son, guarding what remained. The legal war wasn't over. But I already knew how it would end. Because Grant may have started the fire, but I was the one who walked through it and built something new from the ashes. The knock on the door came just after sunset. 3 quick raps, then silence. I was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes from dinner while Finn watched a movie upstairs, the muffled sound of animated voices drifting faintly through the ceiling. I didn't have to look through the peephole to know who it was. I felt it, a kind of tightening in my chest, not fear, just a bracing, like I had trained myself for this moment. I dried my hands on the towel slowly, walked to the door, and opened it just enough to see him. Grant. He stood there in a navy hoodie and jeans that looked rumpled, like he'd pulled them from a pile on the floor. His hair was unkempt, the clean shave he always prided himself on replaced with stubble. There were dark crescents beneath his eyes, and his shoulders hunched as if the weight of his choices had finally begun to settle. "I just want to talk," he said, voice low and strained. I didn't move. There's nothing left to say. His eyes flicked to the new lock, the shiny silver keyhole that had denied him access days ago. He gave a bitter laugh. "So that's it, huh? You really locked me out." I didn't answer that. He already knew. Grant shifted his weight from one foot to the other, trying to muster whatever charm he used to use on me when he'd forget anniversaries or cancel family plans. "Look, I made a mistake," he said, arms lifting in a half-hearted shrug. "Things got complicated. But this is still our life, Isla. We built this together." I let the silence stretch. "You built your part of it with Kaylee," I finally said, each word delivered with steady precision. "You made your choices. You had a family, a home, and you traded that in for lies and convenience." His jaw clenched. "You think I meant to hurt you?" "I think you didn't care if you did." That seemed to land harder than I expected. He looked away for a moment, toward the street, where the porch light from a neighbor's house flickered in the distance. Then he turned back to me, eyes harder now. "You've made this harder than it needed to be," he said. "Freezing accounts, serving papers, changing the locks, Jesus, Isla, do you have any idea what this looks like?" "Yes," I said calmly. "It looks like consequences." He scoffed. "You're so cold now. Like none of this meant anything to you." "You sent a text," I reminded him, the words sharper than the wind that cut across the porch. "You didn't even have the courage to look me in the eye. And now you want sympathy? Access? You think you're owed something." "I'm still Finn's father." "Then act like it," I snapped, the heat finally rising in my voice. "Where have you been?" "You haven't called him. You haven't asked about his school or his schedule. You didn't even send a message on his spelling bee day, and you knew how important that was to him." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because there was no excuse. No spin. "I thought I'd come back," he said after a long pause. "Not right away. But eventually. After things settled. I didn't think you'd go nuclear." I almost laughed. "Nuclear? What you're seeing now. This is me being measured. This is me protecting what's left. You walked out, Grant. You don't get to walk back in just because it's harder than you expected." His expression faltered, desperation creeping in. "Kaylee's not what I thought. She's overwhelmed. Emotional. And this baby, it's a lot." "That was always going to be a lot," I said flatly. "You just thought you'd come crawling back when it got inconvenient." "I miss my life," he said quietly. You miss the version of me who covered for you. Who kept things functioning while you played house on the side. That woman is gone." He stepped forward slightly, eyes pleading now. "Isla, I don't have anywhere else to go." And there it was. The truth beneath every word he'd said so far. Not regret. Not love. Need. Desperation. A man who'd bet everything on a fantasy and lost. Now he was standing on the doorstep of the only place he'd ever had real stability, hoping it would open like it always had. But I wasn't that door anymore. "You need to leave," I said, steady and clear. Grant's face twisted, anger now hot and familiar. "So that's it? After everything we've been through?" "Yes," I said, and closed the door. I didn't slam it. I didn't rage or cry. I simply shut it with finality, and for the first time since this all began, I felt the tremor of something unexpected. Relief. On the other side, I could hear him standing there for a moment. Then his footsteps receded, slow and heavy down the steps, into the night. Upstairs, Finn's movie had ended. I climbed the stairs and peeked into his room. He was already asleep, curled up on his side, breathing softly. I stood there for a long moment, watching the peaceful rise and fall of his chest. I walked back downstairs, locked the new deadbolt, and turned off the porch light. Grant was gone. Not just out of the house, but out of the life I was now rebuilding. And I would never open that door to him again. I received the eviction notice on Kaylee's apartment 2 days later, not directly, of course, but through a mutual acquaintance who still worked at the property management company. It arrived in my inbox attached to a short message. Thought you should see this. Looks like Grant's promises didn't stretch very far. The notice was dated and official. Past due rent. Violation of lease terms. Final warning before legal action. There was something almost poetic about it, how the very life they built on lies and illusions was now being dismantled by something as cold and impersonal as paperwork. Just as mine had been, only I had prepared for the collapse. They had not. I didn't smile when I read it. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt tired. Tired of cleaning up emotional wreckage I hadn't caused. Tired of watching people who had torn me apart now face the chaos they created and act surprised by it. It was around the same time the court finalized the divorce. Eleanor called me personally. "It's done," she said simply. "Judge signed off this morning. You're officially free." Those 3 words echoed in my chest for hours. You're officially free. Not just from Grant. From the weight of pretending. From the cold silences and half-hearted lies. From the invisible labor of holding up a life that only I had been building toward the end. I signed the final forms, reviewed the division of assets, which was almost entirely in my favor, and confirmed custody of Finn with no contest from Grant. He hadn't even shown up for the last hearing. According to Eleanor, his attorney had tried to delay the proceedings, citing emotional duress, but the judge had seen right through it. The facts were clear. The story told itself. I took the papers and filed them away in the fireproof box beneath my bed. Closure in ink and initials. Around me, life began to settle into something that almost resembled peace. The quiet in the house no longer felt like absence. It felt like protection. I didn't jump every time the doorbell rang. I didn't brace myself before opening my email. The anxiety that had once lived in my shoulders, in the tension of my jaw and neck, was beginning to loosen its grip. Finn flourished in the calm. He laughed more. He asked to invite friends over. He stopped waiting by the window in the evening, stopped asking if Dad was coming for dinner. Children are resilient, people always say, and it's true, but what they really are is observant. He felt the shift, sensed the safety, and leaned into it without needing explanations. I made sure he had what he needed. Stability, comfort, and love, so much love. I kept our routines consistent, our dinners warm, our bedtime rituals sacred. And when he asked about his father, I answered with quiet honesty. Sometimes people make choices that hurt others, I told him one night. It doesn't mean they don't care in their own way. But it does mean we have to protect ourselves when those choices break things. He nodded slowly, a serious look on his young face. Are we okay now? We are, I promised. And I meant it. One afternoon, I stopped by my boutique, this small shop I had built years ago with weekend hours and second-hand shelves. It had grown slowly, organically, through craft fairs and online orders, then into a charming little brick-and-mortar store on Main Street. I hadn't been in much during the chaos of the last month, relying on my assistant manager to keep things running. When I walked in that day, the scent of candles and soft fabric hit me like a wave of familiarity. My world, my work, my creation. Customers browsed the spring collection while the soft buzz of conversation floated over the gentle hum of a playlist I'd curated months ago. I stepped into the back office, ran my hand over the counter, and exhaled. This place had survived the storm. So had I. Later that week, I passed by a park and saw Kaylee sitting alone on a bench, one hand cradling her stomach, the other clutching a phone. Her face looked drawn, hollow in a way I didn't recognize. She glanced up as I walked by, But I didn't stop. I didn't acknowledge her. I wasn't cruel about it. I just kept walking, because that part of my life was closed now. And whatever pain she carried, she had to carry it on her own. Grant, I heard, was couch hopping. A friend mentioned he was staying with a former coworker who had since grown tired of his presence. He keeps promising to get back on his feet, they'd said. But no one really believes it anymore. The man who once commanded a room now struggled to command a couch. The illusion had finally unraveled, and beneath it, there was nothing left but consequences and regret. But that wasn't my story anymore. Mine was unfolding in small, quiet victories, folding laundry without resentment, laughing at a sitcom, buying new sheets, planning Finn's birthday party with joy rather than forced smiles. I was free, not just on paper, but in spirit, in space, in peace. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward instead of back. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when I saw him again, not in the courtroom or on my doorstep, but standing outside the boutique, barely visible behind the glass pane, like a ghost pressed against the border of a life no longer his. I was restocking a shelf of scented soy candles when I caught the movement, familiar posture, hands buried deep in the pockets of a coat I hadn't seen in months. Grant. He didn't come inside. He just stood there, as if unsure if he belonged or too ashamed to test the answer. A part of me tensed instinctively, as though my body remembered the way I used to feel around him, always waiting, always bracing. But that feeling didn't stay. It evaporated as fast as it came. In its place was something steadier, detached. A quiet clarity that came not from anger, but from growth. He looked older. Not physically, but in spirit. He had the slump of someone who'd stopped pretending, someone finally starting to feel the cost of the facade he once kept up so confidently. His eyes swept over the storefront, landing briefly on the now hiring, part-time associate sign in the window before flicking to the display of handmade scarves and crafted stationery. I didn't wave. I didn't go outside. Instead, I stepped further into the shop and let the moment sit there, untouched, like an old photo buried in a drawer, once important, now irrelevant. It wasn't long before he turned away. No dramatic exit. No attempt to make contact. Just a slow pivot and a walk down the sidewalk, swallowed up by the flow of strangers who didn't recognize him for who he used to be. To them, he was just a man in a coat. To me, he was a chapter already read, already closed. Later that day, I returned home to find Finn on the couch, coloring in a book while the dog snored at his feet. He looked up and grinned when I walked in. "Hey, Mom. I made you something." He held up a card construction paper folded in half, with crooked lettering and marker that read, "To the strongest mom in the world." My throat tightened, but I smiled and took it gently from his hand. "This is amazing," I said. "Can I frame it?" He beamed. "Yeah, I can make more if you want." "You should," I said, pulling him into a hug. "I'll hang every one of them." It was moments like that, small, pure, and untouched by everything that had come before, that reminded me just how far we'd come. How much of this life was ours now, not borrowed. Not held together by obligation or appearances. Real. Honest. That night, as Finn drifted off to sleep upstairs, I curled into my usual corner of the couch, glass of tea in hand instead of wine. I watched the flickering glow of the fireplace app on the TV, something Finn insisted we use even though we had no actual fireplace. He said it made the house feel extra cozy. And it did. The boutique was thriving. Sales had grown, foot traffic had doubled, and I was in talks with a local artisan collective to collaborate on seasonal products. I'd hired another part-timer, Emma, a college student who was creative, kind, and full of ideas that reminded me what it felt like to dream big again. She brought laughter into the shop and had even taken to baking muffins for the morning shifts. At home, the rhythm was solid. We had weekday themes, Taco Tuesdays, Game Night Thursdays, Pancake Saturdays. Nothing fancy. Just consistency. Love wrapped in predictability. It was everything Finn needed. It was everything I needed. I thought about Grant sometimes, not with longing, but with curiosity. Where did he go after walking away from the boutique that morning? Who did he call? Did he wonder if the boy he used to read bedtime stories to still thought of him? Did he sit in a dim room somewhere, flipping through photos he'd never get to recreate? If he did, I wouldn't know. And I didn't need to. That was the beauty of the life I had rebuilt. There was no room for old ghosts. Only shadows that passed by, noticed, but never invited in. A few days later, I took Finn to the park. The same one we used to visit before the divorce, back when I was still trying to hold things together with duct tape and dinner schedules. This time, it felt different. He ran ahead toward the jungle gym, calling out to friends with the ease of a child who felt safe. I sat on a bench with a book in hand, the sun warm on my skin, the air crisp and humming with the energy of spring. Around me, parents chatted, dogs barked, life moved forward. And I realized something simple but profound. I didn't need closure. I didn't need apologies or acknowledgments or some perfect ending to make sense of the wreckage. I had myself. I had my son. I had peace. And that was more than enough. It started with a call I didn't answer. Then a text. Can we talk? Just one last time. Please. It was Grant's number, still saved in my phone but long muted, tucked away behind the silent wall I'd built for my own protection. His message came through just after 10 p.m., when the house was dark and quiet, Finn long asleep, and I was curled up in bed with the plans for the boutique's summer expansion spread out in front of me. I stared at the message for a full minute, my phone glowing in the dim light of the lamp. I didn't feel tempted, just weary. This was his pattern now: reach out when the consequences caught up to him. When the silence became too loud. When reality refused to bend the way he expected it to. I didn't reply. But that wasn't the end. A second message came the next morning, longer this time, almost frantic. Kaylee left. She took the baby and went to stay with her aunt. I'm alone. I don't know what to do. I've made a mess of everything. I know I don't deserve it, but can we just talk? For Finn's sake? I read it while sipping coffee on the back porch, the morning sun casting gold across the dewy grass. The birds chirped above me. My planner sat open beside me, filled with supplier meetings and product launches. There was no room in my life for this chaos anymore. No space for his confusion, his regrets, his attempts to shift the weight of it all onto my shoulders. I tapped the screen and pressed block. I didn't need to respond to be heard. I had already said everything that needed saying, through actions, through strength, through the unwavering commitment to protect my peace and rebuild what he had tried to destroy. A few hours later, Kaylee reached out too. An email this time, subject line, "Please don't hate me." The message inside was tearful and messy, full of apologies that came too late and questions that weren't mine to answer. She spoke of loneliness, fear, the weight of new motherhood with a man who couldn't support her, emotionally or otherwise. She wrote like a girl lost at sea, hoping I'd toss her a lifeline. But I wasn't that girl anymore either. Not the sister who fixed everything. Not the woman who bent until she broke just to keep the people around her whole. I didn't reply. That evening, Finn and I baked cookies. Double chocolate chip, his request. He cracked the eggs, got flour in his hair, and grinned up at me with that full, unguarded joy only children seem to carry. As the cookies baked, we danced to music in the kitchen, just the two of us, twirling under the soft light, laughing so hard my cheeks ached. He didn't ask about his dad. Not once. And I realized something vital. He had stopped expecting a return. Because I hadn't just removed Grant from our lives, I'd filled the space with love, with consistency, with safety. I had shown my son that leaving was not the same as losing, and that sometimes letting go was the first step to becoming whole again. Later that night, after Finn was asleep, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, my laptop open in front of me. I was finalizing the blueprint for the boutique's second location, something I had dreamed of doing for years, but never truly believed I had the capacity to chase. But now there was no one holding me back. No one quietly undermining my confidence. No one siphoning my energy with secrecy and betrayal. I clicked send on the application for a small business expansion grant, the kind I used to scroll past thinking, that's not for someone like me. Except it was. Because the version of me who once doubted, once accepted crumbs, once tried to keep the peace at her own expense, she was gone. In her place was someone better, wiser, whole. A few friends came over that weekend to help celebrate the boutique's record sales month. There was wine and laughter, soft music playing through the house, and the warm hum of people who knew what I had walked through and never once tried to diminish it. "You're glowing," one of them said, passing me a glass. I smiled, and this time I believed it. Not because I had won some battle, not because I had destroyed the people who tried to destroy me, but because I had quietly, fiercely reclaimed my life. Brick by brick, choice by choice. That night, after everyone had gone home and Finn was fast asleep, I stood at the window and looked out over our neighborhood. The world was quiet. The porch light flickered softly. My phone was silent, not because no one wanted me, but because I had filtered out everyone who didn't know how. I took a long sip of wine, breathing in the peace. Grant was somewhere out there, unraveling. Kaylee was facing the life she'd chosen, unprepared for what it required. But me? I was standing tall in the ruins they left behind, not bitter, not broken, but rebuilt. This wasn't a story of revenge. It was a story of resurrection. And it was mine now. All of it.